Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be discussing once again the shooting of Roger Fortson down in Florida. Happened on May the 3rd, 2024. This was a shooting that is controversial for a large number of reasons. I made a video on this already, and my perspective when I was making that video was I was responding to statements made by attorney Ben Crump in the media that were clearly lies. You know, he said that the deputies were at the wrong apartment, that they burst into the apartment and shot this guy while he was doing nothing more than sitting on the phone. I watched the body camera footage that was clearly, Ben Crump's version of the story is clearly not what happened. So I made a video debunking that. Then I went ahead and made a statement that this shooting was 100% justified based on what the deputy knew at the time. I then went and I posted that on Twitter, and that tweet went absolutely bonkers. It went viral. It's got 9.5 million views, thousands of comments and retweets, and people are just attacking me left and right. The reason that people are attacking me about that tweet is because there's a variety of reasons. It's a very emotional thing, but they also believe that I am saying yes, Roger Fortson needed to die that day. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that based on the information the officer had at the time, this was a justified use of force. We have to remember that sometimes there are going to be uses of forces that once we find out all the facts and circumstances, we don't like them. You know, did this guy need to die on this day? Was he committing some kind of heinous act? No. This is an absolute tragedy what happened to him, but the facts and circumstances that led up to that are what caused the deputy to have his belief, caused him to have that use of force. The deputy has no idea what's going on in his head, all the other things involved, and all the things that we learned after the fact. Therefore, we can only judge the deputy based on the information he knew at the time he pulled the trigger. Now, a lot of people are going on saying, you know, this is what you want. They're calling me a racist, which is fine because people say that kind of stuff and it's ignorant. It's not based on reality at all. But there are examples of officer-involved shootings that are at the end of the day, it's a bad shoot, but it was justified at the same time. We have that term awful versus lawful, and that's what this was on this particular day. And I saw a lot of people saying, you know, how would you feel if this was one of your family members? And I guess the best way for me to kind of address that is I'm going to bring up another officer-involved shooting. This one happened in January 29, 2022, and this is a situation where a police officer was at his own home defending his home with a firearm against a criminal, an armed robbery suspect who had showed up at his house and was attacking this officer. The officer's wife was on the phone with 911 calling and leading deputies into the address. There's a helicopter overhead. We have FLIR footage. The deputies mistakenly shot and killed this officer who was in front of his home with a firearm, doing nothing wrong. He was actually the victim of a potential home invasion. But deputies showed up and they shot him because based on the information that they had, based on the totality of the circumstances and using the best judgment that they had in a high evolving, high fluid, high stress situation, they pulled the trigger and they killed somebody that didn't need to be killed. It's an absolute tragedy, but it's still a justified shooting based on what the deputies knew at the time. This is a deputy, I don't know if he's still working. I can tell you that I would have a hard time continuing on in the career knowing that I killed a police officer that was trying to defend his wife and home from an armed intruder. So we have to keep that in mind, that, you know, we have to take our emotions out of these situations. We have to take 20/20 hindsight out of these situations when we're reviewing them and trying to determine whether or not these incidents are justified. So in order to do that, we're going to go back over what the deputy knew at the time that he pulled the trigger. And in order to do that, we're going to watch the body camera footage again. Once again, I am not playing the actual shooting. I'm actually not even going to play the audio of the shooting on this portion of the body camera. What we're going to do is we're going to go through exactly what the deputy knew leading up to the moment of the shooting, and that's where the video is going to stop, because that's all that the deputy knew, and that's how we have to judge these situations. So we're going to talk about the totality of the circumstances and what a reasonable, prudent officer would think under these same circumstances. So right here at the beginning, you have him showing up, and he's going to talk to a witness that doesn't know anything.
What's going on? I'm not sure.
I'm going to also let you know that I shortened this down to just over 2 minutes, because we're not going to watch the whole 4 minutes of him walking and stuff like that.
I just was told to let her know if you guys come by.
There was a fight going on or something?
I was not present for that.
Yeah, so first witness, he doesn't know. All he knows is that somebody called 911. He was not a witness. Here is our first witness, and this is where the deputy starts to get more information. The information he has so far is that there was a 911 call made, that there's a domestic dispute going on, and it sounds bad. That's basically what the deputy knew at the time. Now he's showing up and talking to witnesses.
Are they fighting or something?
She's saying that it happens frequently.
Okay.
But this time it sounded like it was getting out of hand.
Okay, so on the day that he showed up, he has a witness that says the neighbor is saying that this happens frequently, and today it sounds like it's getting out of hand. So what the deputy is now informed of is that this this apartment potentially has a long-term domestic abuse relationship going on, potentially. And when you have that in the back of your mind, there's a lot of things that begin to come into play. She then says that, and today things are getting out of hand, and that's per a third-party caller. That's not part of her. Should not witness what was happening today, but the person that she talked to said this has happened many times before. Today it's getting out of hand, and she believed that person.
Okay, which store?
So I'm not sure. 2 weeks ago I was walking by their apartment basically on this side, and I was hearing someone yell like, "Shut the f*** up, like you stupid B word," and all this other stuff, and I heard a slap right after it, but I wasn't sure where it came from.
Okay, so this is a part of the video that a lot of people are getting confused about, because you have the caller in this situation is not the witness to whatever occurred today. She talked to a third party who says, yeah, this happens all the time, and sounds like today it's getting really bad. Now the caller is saying, I do have some firsthand information about some history at that particular apartment. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was walking by that apartment. I heard some loud screaming and stuff. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, so I didn't bother calling the police. What she's saying is now I can corroborate the information I had from 2 weeks ago, because somebody that has firsthand information is hearing what they believe to be an assault occurring in this apartment today. So you have an officer who was dispatched on a call that was made to 911, is talking to someone that's giving them the history that's corroborating the stuff that's going on in that apartment today.
And I couldn't call, I didn't want to call the police. And,
Which room is it?
1401.
1401, okay.
1401. But the girl sounded scared, the one that called. She said, she was like, it sounds like it's getting really out of hand.
So it's hit number 4, huh?
Yeah.
So you have a neighbor that sounded scared. You know, this wasn't just like an overly annoying neighbor saying, look, my neighbors are arguing again. She said, you know, I'm actually terrified that something really bad is happening. I need a police officer to come and deal with this situation. So there's a bunch of information coming into this deputy that in his mind, there is definitely some kind of domestic abuse or domestic violence situation going on in that apartment. He's about to go.
We sent out there and directed the deputy that's coming to this area?
It's not, you're going to go to the fourth floor, and it's going to be on this side.
Gotcha.
Again, we know this is the apartment. So now the deputy is going to kind of look, listen, and feel. He's trying to say if there is some violence going on, something that he needs to immediately become involved in, if he needs to kick a door to save somebody's life, anything like that, or to determine whether or not it's actually safe to go ahead and knock on the door. Because there are situations, I've been in this situation before, where I show up on a call like this, and it sounds like World War III going on in there. I hear yelling and screaming and stuff being destroyed. Before I knock, I'm going to go ahead and try that door handle. If the door is unlocked, there's a good chance I'm going to push that door open. I'm going to have a look for myself. That's an extenuating circumstance, right? These are reasons for warrantless entry. So he's listening. He doesn't hear anything like that. And also the reason that I might go ahead and just open that door and push it open is because if there's a violent assault going on, if I knock on the door during that violent assault, if there's guns involved, the perpetrator, hearing a knock on the door might say, oh, it's the police. Either I'm going to jet out the back door, or I'm going to go ahead and kill the person that I'm fighting with. Or if I'm armed, I'm going to turn and assault that police officer. So he listens for a little bit, doesn't hear anything absolutely that he has to intercede on immediately. So he's going to go ahead and knock. He thinks it's at least safe enough to knock. This is something that a lot of people are bringing up and saying that, how was he supposed to know it was a deputy outside? He stepped out of the way of the people. This is 100% what officers are trained to do. You're trained not to stand in that fatal funnel in the doorway. The lawyer, the self-defense lawyer, he even said, these are the ways that people die. Doorways, hallways, and another way. I can't remember what he said. But you don't stand in front of the door just because you don't want bullets coming at you. It was hard to hear, but right there you heard him saying, who is it? And you hear him inside saying something about the police. So first he said, who is it? Then he said something about the police. So now the deputy is under the belief, because I would be under the same belief if I was there, that I now have a guy who knows the police have been called and that the police are at his door. So now, since the element of surprise or something like that is out there, I'm going to start saying, yes, it's the police. I acknowledge that you've acknowledged me. Come to the door.
Sheriff's office, open the door! Sheriff's office, open the door!
All right, so the door is about to open, and we're going to see what we're going to see here in a second. Again, I'm not playing the shooting of the video of the shooting. It's going to be just a still shot of him standing there with a gun, what the officer sees. I'll just leave it there.
Step out.
Right there. So this is what the deputy sees. So leading up to this event, he believes that 100% he was responding to a call of active domestic violence. It wasn't that it happened 2 weeks ago. All of these things he believed based on the call and the sense of urgency from the caller and the witness, that this was something that was prudent that it be dealt with immediately. So the officer is knocking on the door. The person inside says something about the police. So they heard him knocking at the door. He then announces it's a sheriff's department. The guy opens the door with a gun. As a police officer, we respond to domestic violence calls all the time, and officers are shot and killed responding to domestic violence calls all the time. When you're responding to a call of domestic violence and somebody opens the door with a gun in their hand, it reminds you of all of your buddies that have been killed in this situation, all of the officers who have been killed in this situation. A reasonable, prudent officer who is responding to a call of domestic violence, and the person opens the door with a firearm, that reasonably prudent officer would believe that that person came to the door with the intent to shoot and kill the officer. That's why this is a justified use of force. This is not a situation where the guy was just standing in his home with a firearm and that no other facts matter. All of the facts leading up to this moment are to be taken into consideration when trying to decide whether or not this is a justified use of force. That's it. Do I think it's a justified use of force? Do I think a reasonably prudent officer would feel that this guy came to the door with a gun in order to kill him? I do. I do believe that a reasonable officer, a reasonably prudent officer based on his training and experience, given this situation, would feel that his life was in danger and that a court would not convict the officer of murder in this situation. That's it. That's not my my emotions about the case. That's not me passing judgment on the guy. Has nothing to do with his race. A lot of people were bringing that in, which is absolutely ridiculous. Everything leading up to this moment caused the officer to believe that this was a legitimate call of domestic violence. It turns out it wasn't. And we don't know why. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. Now, one thing I'll bring up, just because we have this screen up right here, a lot of other people are saying, you know, well, he didn't believe it was the police. He believed that it was a home invasion because, you know, people often pretend to be the police when they're going to do a home invasion. One, that is so incredibly rare. As a police officer, I've only encountered it in 13 years one time in real life in my career. And the people that did this, it's often because the people on the other side of the door are involved in crime as well. But regardless of that fact, and regardless of it being very rare, if you really thought that someone was banging on your door pretending to be the police and that they were not the police and this was going to be a home invasion, would you open your door all the way out and step out with your gun down at your side? That's not something that people do. When people do that, they go and they look through the people, they challenge you again and again and again. They will call 911. I've had this happen to me many times. They'll call 911 saying, someone's at my door saying that they're the police. And then the dispatcher will say, yes, it is the police. You need to go answer the door. And then they'll say, well, I haven't done anything wrong. I don't want to talk to the police. Make them go away. And, you know, we'll kind of work through that and determine if we're going to go away or if we're not going to go away. But also if someone challenges me and is talking to me through the door, that actually will help bring my guard down a little bit. Now, if we have that conversation and someone still comes to the door with a gun, it still might end up this way. But this isn't the way to handle that kind of situation. For whatever reason it is, Roger Fortson made a poor decision to come to the door that day with a gun in the manner that he did. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what he was thinking or what he wasn't thinking. If he made a poor decision or not, maybe I should strike that part from the video, right? It doesn't matter what he was thinking. The only thing that matters is would a reasonable officer, given the circumstances that this deputy was in, would he have believed the same thing that the deputy did? And he would. Something else that I want to address, and I think I have it pulled up on my screen here. This is one of the things that was all over Twitter. And when I bring this up, let me get myself out of the way. A lot of people in the community notes of Twitter are going and trying to say that this was not justified because of this case, Nibs versus Momford. I don't remember what state this was in, but it's a case where it says merely holding a firearm is not enough to cause an officer to believe that you're about to shoot him. Therefore, it's an unjustified use of deadly force, and we rule against the defendant, which was a police officer Mofford in this case. The problem with bringing this one up is that this was a civil case. This was a civil case for damages where the city didn't believe that they had to pay damages. They took this to the Fourth Circuit, and that the judge, I think it's just one judge. I don't know if it's a panel of judges. Forgive me on that one. But they ruled that no, based on the preponderance of the evidence, we don't believe that the officer was justified. Therefore, we're going to rule for the estate and give them some money. What this is not a criminal conviction. The officer in this case was not indicted, was not charged, did not stand trial. His use of force was deemed to be a justified use of force. Now, I did go ahead and read the case. I've got the case up right here. And I'm not going to go through the entire case, but I'm going to talk about the case as briefly as I possibly can. So this is a case where this guy Nips right here had a neighbor that he didn't like. He was accusing him of being a drug dealer. So the neighbor over here, who was our caller, was having a bonfire and a bunch of people over. People kept pulling into Nips's driveway, and Nips was getting really annoyed about this. So he eventually, as this party raged on all night long, he went out and put boards in the road with screws in them. I believe it was in the road. Maybe it was in his own driveway. I can't remember. But he went out and did something with boards and screws. And it was in order to puncture people's tires that were going to the neighbor's house. So this neighbor, who might have been a bad guy for all that we know, he went ahead and called the police. He called the police and said, there's boards in the roads that are spiking people's tires. Can you have an officer come out here? So Officer Mumford, that was his name, I'll just call him Officer, pulls up, parks on the far side of Nips's house. The reason he parked on the far side of Nips's house is because he knew that there were objects, or he was told there was a possibility there's objects in the road that this guy put there in order to puncture tires. He didn't want his cruiser tires to be popped. So he parked here and he walked down the street to the caller's house. One of the observations that he made when he parked his car just up the street from Nips's house and walked across is that all the lights were on in all these windows. They had the house all lit up. He then walked over here, talks to the caller, caller tells him about his problem, and the officer goes back to the suspect, Michael. I think his name was Michael Nips. He goes up to try to make contact with the suspect of this criminal damaging or attempt criminal damaging, putting objects in the roadway. When he went back to the house was completely dark. He testified that he believed at the time that the suspect, because this is a suspect in this situation, the suspect saw his cruiser pulled up and knew that the police were going to be making contact with him, didn't want to talk to the police, so he shut all the lights off in his house. Officer goes back to the house, knocks on the door with all of the lights off. The door is right here. He goes and stands off to the side, away from the door. And as he's doing his look, listen, and feel, waiting for someone to come to the door, because in his mind, he knows that they're aware that there's a police officer outside based on his observations, whether or not they're correct. That was his belief at the time. He's standing off over here and he hears off to his, I don't know, left or right, whichever he was facing, the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being racked. He knows that 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt, he just heard somebody put a round into the chamber of a shotgun. He then shines his flashlight up in a window and he sees a man standing there with a shotgun in his hand looking out the window. The deputy is just outside of that window. The deputy, hearing that round get put in the chamber of a shotgun, then shining his light in that window, seeing a man with a shotgun, immediately felt that he was being hunted by the caller, because the caller was hiding in a dark house, had the upper hand on the officer or deputy, whoever it was. The deputy felt that his life was in immediate danger, turns, fires through the window, shot and killed Mr. Nips. That was deemed a justified shooting. They lost the civil trial and they had to pay damages to the family because at the end of the day, this guy was actually probably just the victim that overreacted to what was going on with his neighbor. He wasn't a bad guy. He was probably the guy inside the house, Mr. Nips, was probably under the assumption that the neighbor that he thinks is a drug dealer was coming over to start something. So he was standing there with a shotgun waiting to see if this guy was going to come in the house and he was going to shoot and kill this guy. This is a situation where this guy was doing, as far as the use of force goes, he was doing nothing wrong. But the officer 100% believed that his life was in danger, shot and killed him. That's what this case was actually about. It's not simply about standing there holding a weapon in your house. If you're just standing there holding a weapon in your house and an officer shoots you, obviously that's not a justified shooting. But you have to look at all of the elements, all of the things that led up to the moment when that officer chose to discharge his weapon. Now we're going to get into this one. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, this shooting is emotionally charged. A lot of people are, oh, he's an American patriot. He's in the Air Force. He's a good kid. And then, so you've got that, which is great. I'm sure he is a good kid. There's nothing I've heard contrary to that. And being in the Air Force, that's a good thing. You want to serve your country. Then you've got the fact that he was black. He's African American. And anytime a black person is shot by a white officer, there's always going to be emotions in that, because there's going to be accusations of racism and this and that and the other thing. You have to take all of that out and just think for a moment with fact-based only thinking and reevaluate the situation. That's the reason I'm doing this one again because you have an officer who was doing nothing wrong. He was at his home, defending his home and his wife from an armed robbery suspect, and he was shot and killed by police. I've got a little story right here about it, and I'm just going to kind of run you through what happened. Now, this was a Vancouver officer in the state of Washington, and it happened in Clark County, Washington. Those two are right on the border of the state. I can't remember if he worked in Vancouver, Washington, but lived in Clark County, Oregon. It doesn't really matter. It's Vancouver city officer, Clark County deputy. The state doesn't matter. So he is in his house having no idea what's going on in the world around him. Unbeknownst to him, there was a man, I've got the names written down over here, Julio Segura. This man, Julio Segura, stole a Mercedes-Benz and then went and did an armed robbery. He committed an armed robbery with a fake firearm. As he's leaving, deputies are hot on his trail, and there's a high-speed pursuit, speeds over 120 miles an hour. They put spike strips in the road. Mr. Segura weaves to avoid the spike strips, wrecks his car in a ditch, and then runs up to a house. The house that he runs up to is the house that is occupied by this Vancouver City police officer, and his name is, I always have a hard time pronouncing it, Donald Sahota. I'm going to say Sahota is how you pronounce it. Sahota, Sahota. He goes up to this officer's house and is being erratic, and suspicious. He goes up to the house and is like, "Hey, I'm being chased by the police. Can you let me in? I need some place to hide." Now, this guy being a police officer, he's not going to allow that to happen. He tells his wife, "Go ahead and call 911. Tell him we got something weird going on out here. I'm going to go out and talk to this guy." He goes outside. He's armed with a firearm. The two have a physical fight. During that fight, he is stabbed by Mr. Segura. He's cut severely from the information I read previously. He had his firearm on him at the time. He ends up losing his firearm, and you're going to see that in the video. I'm going to play the video from the helicopter here in a moment. He loses his firearm during that struggle. Then deputies, who are getting there as fast as they can, they drive up the driveway. As their vehicles are driving up the driveway, the suspect, Mr. Segura, ends up breaking free from the officer and running into the house. The deputies don't see that part. What they see is Officer Sahota reaching back, grabbing his firearm off the ground, turning and running back into the house. The deputies arrive on scene, believe that they have an armed robbery suspect that's about to run into a house. They engage the suspect, shooting and killing him. Unfortunately, the person that they shot and killed is a police officer. Let's watch that video now, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it, and we'll close up the video.
Are they still struggling there? I can't tell. Looks like they might be fighting. Hit record. You're recording, right?
Yeah, they're definitely fighting. Let's move down there, guys. They're definitely fighting.
Yeah. Because that guy's a cop. He's probably armed.
Yes, they are fighting. Code 3 response, come in.
Is that his gun on the ground?
Code 3, your target's going to be northeast 84th Avenue.
Looks like a hot thing just fell, like a gun or something, and they're still wrestling in the front. Where are they?
Getting close in here.
All right, it's to their east, right there. They're on the road. They're on the access road.
Yeah, they're still.
Okay, come in. That's the right road. Come up. Right where you're at. Take a right.
He got out of the car, I think.
Okay, you're going to have to run up. It's a little ways up there. They're still fighting. Oh, he's running. Be careful, that's a gun right there, I think. You just picked it up. God damn it.
Shots fired.
So that was pretty hard to watch. The people in the helicopter weren't aware of which party was which party. All they knew is that there was a fight going on and that one person got up and ran into the house. I think that their belief was that was the officer, that the officer had his weapon stripped from him and needed to get back in the house to gain another weapon or get secure. Maybe the officer heard the sirens coming and thought, I'm going to get in the house and I'm going to leave the suspect outside. There's a million things that are going through their heads, but they had no idea. They actually had no idea what was what. But the officers that pulled up were under the belief that the officer had run into the house and that the suspect was still outside, that the suspect grabbed the firearm from the officer, was running back into the house to potentially kill both of them. So the deputies that arrived on scene, this is what they saw. Deputy arrives on scene, sees a man with a gun running into a house, gets out and does what he thinks he has to do. There's going to be shootings that, with 2020 hindsight, where clearly the wrong person was shot. But that's not how we judge these shootings. I'm not going to judge the deputy that shot Officer Sahuda. I'm not going to say he was a bad guy or a bad person, that he made a poor decision. If the roles had been reversed and he didn't pull that trigger, and that was actually the suspect that had the firearm and ran out of the house, there might have been 2 dead innocent people. When we're judging whether or not a shooting is justified, we're only basing that decision upon what the deputy knew at the time that he pulled the trigger, and whether a reasonably prudent officer, based on his training and experience, would have made the same decision. And in both cases, I do believe that this was a reasonable use of force. I believe that based upon the totality of the circumstances, a reasonably prudent officer would have, we'll go back to this. I believe that based on the totality of the circumstances, given the information that the deputy knew at the time he pulled the trigger, a reasonably prudent officer, based upon their training and experience, would have felt that their life was in danger, would have felt that this person opened the door with the intent to harm them. It's really easy to slow the footage down and freeze frame and look at the guy's posture and all that. At the time that you're making this life or death decision, you don't have time to evaluate all of those things. It's a horrible tragedy what happened to Robert Fortson. We don't have to like it. I hope that his family is taken care of. But the deputy made the decision that he thought was right at the time, and that's what we need to judge us on. I think that's it for me today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.